introduction. So I see many of you that I was shoulder to shoulder with back in 2003 when we were fighting that constitutional amendment that now disgraces our state constitution. How many of you are still out there that were in Atlanta back in 2003 and remember that fight, Amendment 1? You remember how we said that it wasn't over? You remember how we said that you may have won this battle, but you will not win the war? Today, we know we were right. I'm so honored to have the opportunity to speak to you today, and I've never been happier to be part of this beautiful LGBT community. Today is a historic day, June 26th. It was just 12 years ago that the Supreme Court struck down laws that made LGBT people criminals for having the audacity to express their love intimately. It was just 2 years ago that the Supreme Court struck down the ridiculously misnamed Defense of Marriage Act. And now, today, the Supreme Court struck down laws that prohibited us from the fundamental right to form families. Today, the Supreme Court recognized the humanity and the dignity of LGBT people. They recognize that we are, in fact, people. Just like everyone else, we seek companionship and romance. We fall in love. We have children and we bring into the world that we bring into our lives. We dream, we couple, we worry, we age, and we need and want the right to marry. And yet the government of this state and of 37 states passed laws that ignored this reality, and so our humanity. But no more. Today, the Supreme Court recognized that the essential promises of the Constitution extend to LGBT people who asked for no more than to be able to protect and provide for their families. Today, the Supreme Court has delivered justice, but it has done no more than do its job to faithfully interpret the Constitution. And yet today, because the Supreme Court did its job, same-sex couples and their families can say we are second-class citizens. No more! That's right. Woo! So today's decision is about marriage, but it's about so much more than marriage. Today's decision sends a message that our lives are equally valuable, that our love is equally precious, that our families are equally entitled to dignity and respect. Today's decision means that LGBT people have more freedom, more safety, more access to live out of the shadows, out of the margins, out of the hole dug for us by centuries of laws that were built on misunderstanding. Supreme Court today said, we can say, I do. And I will. I want to thank you, all of you. I want to thank you for supporting Lambda Legal and Georgia Equality so that they can pay us to keep working on full equality full time. But even more so for coming out to anyone that you came out to. So only by living your lives openly, holding your heads high, that this moment of sweeping social change happened. You are partly responsible for this decision today. You created a climate in which we could bring these cases. You allowed the Supreme Court to rule for us today. You, who support, who show up, who come out, you are the reason that we're living through this historic time and watching unjust laws disappear. Thank you. So as a lawyer who, by the way, works for Lambda Legal, so proud to work for Lambda Legal, an organization that has been fighting for LGBT equality for more than 40 years. The organization that brought the case 12 years ago, that struck down the laws that made us criminal, that won dozens of marriage cases along the way, that brought to Georgia marriage challenge, the case that will lead the way to ensure that marriage equality comes to everyone who wants to marry in this great state, and that represented plaintiffs before the Supreme Court in the decision that was rendered today. As a lawyer, I can tell you that this decision will stand the test of time. It was principled and thoughtful. It did no more than expand the constitutional promises of equality, dignity, and liberty to another class of Americans, as it should have. The basis for the ruling was at once simple, yet monumental. The Supreme Court recognized fundamental freedoms are not meant to be hoarded for those who have always enjoyed them, but to be expanded as fundamental American ideals. This decision will stand as one of those historic cases that lawyers and lay people alike will recognize as a beacon of all that is great about our constitutional democracy. And you helped make that happen. You helped make us win. But even, as Jeff said, as we celebrate this historic victory for same-sex couples and their families, the tragedy in Charleston reminds us that our struggles for justice in this country are ongoing and connected, and that hatred and violence based on race, based on hate, based on prejudice must end. Even as we celebrate, we must mourn the loss of 9 people who were murdered last week. But today the court has handed us an important landmark victory. Our work is not over, but today we celebrate. Tomorrow we get back to work. Well, maybe not tomorrow. Maybe you can wait till Monday. But when we do, we'll work for protections for LGBT people in workplace and fairness for people living with HIV, for LGBT youth in schools and to get them off the street, and for equality and justice for our transgender brothers and sisters.
Yeah!
We will. We will be mindful of the intersections of racial and economic injustice and LGBT discrimination. We will fight back against the efforts to couch discrimination as religious freedom. And we will fight back against efforts to try to marginalize our marriages as same-sex marriages. No quotey fingers, people. That is not what we won today. Make no mistake, we did not win same-sex marriage. We won the right to marry. There are no same-sex marriage licenses. If there are, call me. We'll sue again. I urge you to claim your equality. It is marriage. Call it what it is. A common language is a powerful tool. Today, in the haze of the moment, some may think since there are winners, us, you, that there are losers, but they would be wrong. They would be short-sighted. Because when the fog of this moment lifts, it will be clear that there are no losers, only winners, because today, equality won over bigotry, respect won over intolerance, compassion won over dominance.
Woo, Beth Littrell, yeah!
And yes, knowledge won over blind bigotry, and love won over hate. Today, same-sex couples are embraced within the meaning of equality and liberty, and so we are embraced within the fabric of society. Our families won, but all families won. By treating marriage equally under the law, by removing legal obstacles that kept some of us from protecting and providing for our families, our society will be stronger. Children will grow up in a more tolerant, loving, compassionate country. Loving couples are no longer relegated to forever be legal strangers to each other. No more. Today, the Supreme Court ruled that love not only wins. Who's got one of the signs? Love rules! have had the honor to represent, along with a great legal team, plaintiffs who were brave enough to let us invade their homes and their lives, and through them argue for marriage equality. And one of them has agreed to be here today to say a few words. She's not a lawyer, so it really might be a few words. One of our brave and proud plaintiffs, ladies and gentlemen, Rayshawn Chandler.
Thank you, Atlanta.